Hello, this is Mrs. Taylor, and I'm going to walk you through how to graph a quadratic inequality with a dashed parabola. So just a quick refresh, when you're graphing inequalities, that's when you're going to shade part of the coordinate plane. When you're solving, that's when you darken in part of the x-axis. So sketching the graph, the first thing I need to do is determine some points on my parabola. And those points are the y-intercept, the vertex, and the zeros. The y-intercept's really easy, because if your expression is in standard form, which is ax squared plus bx plus c, you could just look at the c value and know what the y-intercept is. So here it's 34. The next point I want to find is the vertex. And to find the x value, I do opposite of b, which would be 16 over 2a, which would be 2 times 2. 2 times 2 is 4. 16 divided by 4 is 4. So the x value of my vertex is 4. To find the y value, I take the 4, plug it into this quadratic expression. So I would have 2 times 4 squared minus 16 times 4 plus 34. And then I'm going to plug that in my calculator. So I would have 2 times 4 squared minus 16 times 4 plus 34. And my result is 2. So that is the y value of my vertex. The last thing I want to find is my zeros, or are my zeros rather. And with this particular quadratic expression, I'm going to try the x puzzle first. And remember, with the x puzzle, if there's a GCF, you want to factor it out first. So if I set that expression equal to 0, and then I factor out the GCF of 2, I would get that. Now, anticipating with the x puzzle, if I try to solve this x puzzle, there is no solution. So I'm looking at either having to solve this with completing the square or the quadratic formula. And I'm going to choose the quadratic formula. So x equals the opposite of b, which would be 16 plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And then I'm going to simplify my discriminant first. So negative 16 squared minus 4 times 2 times 34. So plugging in my discriminant, it would look like that. And I get negative 16. And then the 2 times 2 on the bottom becomes 4. The square root of 16 is 4, but there's a negative there, so I have to remember to make or to accommodate for that with an I that represents the square root of negative 1. So this would simplify to 16 plus or minus 4i over 4. Both of those terms are divisible by 4. So that would be 4 plus or minus I. Now, for purposes of graphing, these are my zeros, but it doesn't help me graph because they're imaginary, which means that the parabola is not going to cross the x-axis. So I'm going to plot the vertex, and my y-intercept is way up there. So I got to find another point that I can reflect over the axis of symmetry to get a total of 3. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick a number to the left of my vertex, either 1, 2, or 3. I'm going to pick 3. And I'm going to plug it into this expression using my calculator. So 2 times 3 squared minus 16 times 3 plus 34. So plugging in my calculator for x equals 3, I get 4. So the point 3, 4 is a point on your parabola. So I'm going to plot that. And then I'm going to reflect that point over the axis of symmetry. Remember, the axis of symmetry is this imaginary line that travels through the vertex. So it would go over there. Now remember, before you draw your parabola, you have to remember to to check the inequality symbol to see if you're going to have a dashed or a solid line. Well, this inequality doesn't have an equal to. So that means I have to create a dashed line. So when I draw my parabola, I just do some dotted lines instead of a solid line. And all that means is that any point on the parabola, when I plug it in, will not be a solution to the inequality. However, I do have to figure out which region to shade. And so I'm going to pick a test point, and I'm going to pick 0, 0 for this one because it's easy to plug in and it's not on the parabola, so it's a safe point to use. And I'm going to plug that in. So I'm going to get 0 is less than 2 times 0 squared minus 16 times 0 plus 34. And remember, we put a little question mark above your inequality symbol to show that we're testing. We don't know if that's actually a true statement. And so 2 times 0 squared would be 0. 16 times 0 would be 0. So all this was simplified to just 34. And 0 is less than 34. So that means that point is in the solution region, which means I need to shade the region that point is in. And it's here outside of the parabola. So that tells me to shade outside of the parabola. And I would be finished. So that's how you would graph a quadratic inequality with a dashed line.